All right, Proverbs 16:12 is where we're going to start. As we already have said, that it's, as you've already noticed, we're talking about wise governance. Who wrote the book of Proverbs? Yeah, primarily Solomon. You also have Agur and Lemuel who contributed to it, but mostly Solomon. Who did Solomon address Proverbs to? His son. So what was Solomon's position in Israel? King. So that would have made his son what? Prince. So it is written from a governor, a ruler, to a member of the government and possible future ruler. So if, for example, Rehoboam was the one that received, or that Proverbs was first given to, Rehoboam went on to become king of Israel. We don't know if Rehoboam received Proverbs. He certainly didn't live Proverbs. But it was written from a ruler to those in government. And I don't think I've said much about this, but there is a lot of similarity in the Proverbs to wisdom literature of other nations, especially Egypt. And we know that the wisdom literature of these other nations was specifically oriented towards those who would be in government. And so I think we can rightly understand Proverbs as addressed to those who would be rulers of their people. It's not limited to them by any means, but that as maybe a first audience or primary audience was those who would be or were currently rulers of a people, those who were in government. And so the fact that Proverbs says a lot about government is not really surprising with that in view. It was certainly a concern of Solomon's. He governed and he had to make choices about wise governance. And certainly I'm sure he would have desired to teach his son how to govern wisely. And so as we're reading it, having that perspective, I think is helpful in recognizing this is not theoretical for Solomon. This is practical. This is where he lived every day in the governing of the nation. We also recognize that we live in a different kind of government and in a different time period. So that Solomon, writing as a monarch, who the single ruler over the nation, there was no checks and balances in Israel. He ruled, and he ruled supremely, and he ruled under the Mosaic covenant to the people. So that covenant made by God with the people of Israel regarding the promised land, regarding the sacrifices and how to live rightly before their God. We live in a democracy where not only do we have checks and balances on the rulers, but we as members of this democracy have a role in the ruling of our nation. We have the voice in voting at the very least. We have other opportunities to be even more active participants in the rule of our individual communities and our nation. And so we also are living in the church age, no longer under the Mosaic covenant, no longer is the people of God a nation in a geographical and a political sense, but now we are a chosen generation. We are a group of people across political boundaries, across geographic and language boundaries. And so we come to what the Old Testament teaches about government, and we come to what Proverbs teaches about government, and there is a gap to be bridged. However, because we're dealing with the Proverbs, that gap is much smaller, and there's many more things that we rightly can immediately apply. And so we do well to remember that there is a gap, and we can't necessarily just say that, we cannot say that America should be run like Israel under David and Solomon were run. We can't say that was the only right way to govern a nation. But we also can't say these don't apply either. We have to work through and make and understand them and understand how they apply to us today. So all of that is kind of background there. We have the different kinds of parallelism, and we've talked about. So reading Proverbs 16:12, it is an abomination for kings to commit wickedness, for a throne is established by righteousness. What kind of parallelism is this? Yeah, I would put this as developing, adding that new information, because it now tells us, it's an abomination for kings to commit wickedness. Here's the reason why. There's an explanation of this, because a throne is established by righteousness. What's the really the first description? There's the first descriptive word. It is an abomination. Does anybody remember what an abomination is? Yeah, the disgusting really catches the sense of it. It's something which is revolting. It's not just a sense of this is hated, but that it makes you sick to the stomach to see it. It's something that's just so horrible and disgusting to you. It is a stench. It's something vile you want nothing to do with. And so Solomon says it is abominable. What's the abomination? Abomination for kings to commit wickedness. So it's a full phrase there, two prepositional phrases, but the full idea here that you have the kings, particularly, the committing wickedness is particularly abominable for kings. So his focus is on those who would rule a nation, and he is saying this is a particularly vile thing when the rulers of nations are doing that which is evil. In the second phrase, which word is related to or comparable to kings? Throne. So that's what ties the two phrases together. Why is throne comparable to king? Exactly. It is a thing that we associate with kings, with royalty. So when we talk about a throne, obviously he's not talking about the physical chair that he sits in. It's not that righteousness keeps that chair from wobbling, but that he's talking about the rule of the king. You might say a monarchy or a kingdom is what? It's established. Well, the word that's being used is actually, it's stabilized. It is made stable, is made secure, made firm. That's really what he's meaning with established. And what is it that makes a kingdom or a reign firm and stable? Righteousness. So there you have the direct contrast here between the kind of thing being done in the first phrase, wickedness, and that which should be done in the second phrase, righteousness. And so you have this developing proverb which tells us why kings should not be wicked, because it is an abominable thing. And then when we bring in the second half of this verse, it also teaches us that kingdoms and rule is not made more secure, more firm, more stable, more certain by wickedness. There is an aspect of contrast happening in this verse. So even though this is not really a contrasting parallelism, we do see the comparisons being made. And he's saying that really rulers that commit wickedness are going against that, are doing that which does not make a rule or a kingdom more secure. Leaders should hate evil. If it is an abomination for kings to commit wickedness, then they should hate it. Our leaders should hate evil. Wickedness is counterproductive to a politician's desires. And we know politicians seek power. And they seek generally a longevity in it. They get a position, and typically they desire to stay in it. They want to be reelected. And what Proverbs tells us is that wickedness does not make their reign or their rule more secure or more certain. It actually makes it less certain. It is counterproductive. Now that raises some questions I'll come back to as we think about how that relates to us today. But we also see, as Carolyn's already stated, righteous rulers are good for the nation. And the last thing, God cares what the king does. Where did God come in this verse? Typically, when you see abomination in the Old Testament and in Proverbs, it's something which is an abomination to God. Not using it in a general sense, but a very specific sense. And I think that's what he's saying here, is that when a ruler commits wickedness, it is abominable to God. And so we would rightly say, God cares what the king does. And we know very clearly in Israel, God cared what Solomon did. God cared what Rehoboam did. God cared what Uzziah did and Manasseh did. He cared what the kings of Israel did because Israel was his covenant people. They were his chosen people that he had promised to give this land, to have this special relationship with. So can we apply that truth to today? Does God care what the King of England does? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We can go to even Romans 13 and talk about the function of government. And to be, maybe more politically accurate then, does God care what the Prime Minister of England does? Or the Prime Minister of Canada? Or the President of the United States? Or the Governor of Michigan? Or the Supreme Court of the United States? We rightly recognize that the God who rules over all creation, Acts 17 tells us he establishes nations, establishes their boundary and their duration, how long they last. He is ruling over all these things. And he has a definite and a direct concern for what political leaders do. And so as we go back to the one point here, the wickedness is counterproductive to a politician's desires. Maybe this is cynical, but it certainly seems as if that being elected to office in America is corrupting. And so that to maintain one's position or to have, for example, in Congress, any clout in Congress and to be able to accomplish your agenda in Congress, what's going to have to happen? They're going to compromise and vote, and it certainly seems as if there's a kind of a force to vote for one thing that you disagree with, so somebody else will vote for whatever you're trying to accomplish. And we talk about, and I say this seems cynical, and I don't want to say that every politician does this. I don't think that's fair to say. But there is a characterization that the corrupt ones stay in office. And I'm not going to ask for you to name any names, but I'm guessing that everybody can think of some corrupt politicians that were there for decades. And even this whole Epstein thing. And we're finding out there's so many people in incredible positions of power that are horrifically wicked. And so if wickedness is actually counterproductive to a politician's desires, if wickedness destabilizes a nation, why does it seem like it works? Yet we cannot forget that we live in a system that is controlled by, at least secondarily, not ultimately, is controlled by Satan. And there is his agenda that he is accomplishing. Yeah, we have a widespread wickedness. We live in a corrupt world, and most of our politicians are not saved. They're not going to love righteousness and hate evil. And they're not going to vote for people that hate evil because then they hate what they're doing. Or they're not going to support those who hate evil because then they're going to hate what they're doing. We see this seemingly in the last 20 years with every conservative president. Despised, utterly despised. And a lot of reasons offered for it. But the one thing that's in common is an opposition to the homosexual agenda. Come out against homosexuality, and you will be hated as a leader. Yeah, and abortion. Yeah, both of them are going to be, they're not going to want anything to do with you. They're going to despise you utterly. And so it seems as if wickedness isn't that bad, at least for a politician. So how do we explain then that, Proverbs is true, which it is? How do we explain the truthfulness of this statement in light of the reality of the world we live in? But again, the challenge we face right now is there are those in practicing great wickedness who seem secure in their power. They haven't read the end of the book. And so that we know the ultimate end is they will be judged. Their power will be taken away from them. The book of Daniel tells us that he is going to overthrow the nations of the world and establish a universal righteous nation. And so in the ultimate sense, wickedness will result in the loss of everything the politician desires. I think in a more immediate sense, that this destabilizing effect of wickedness is not immediate. And sometimes it is multi-generational. And so I think we're seeing that. I know we're seeing that in America. We trace things back at the very least to the 50s. And I think we can go beyond that, but just for simplicity's sake, we trace things back to the 50s. We see the sexual revolution of the 60s. So that now, nearly 60 years later, we are feeling the effects of decisions made back then. And those effects are wreaking havoc in our society. I mean, really, would anybody say that America is a more stable society today than it was in 1963? Just to pick a random date. No, I don't think you can say that. Everybody's saying how fractured we are, how there's conflict and consternation there is. There's still, there's rioting, there's fear fear of what the government's going to do. There's a sense of, and some feel like they're being oppressed by the government. There are others who look at it and say these are anarchists. They're just wanting to overthrow everything. And there's this sense in our nation of great instability. And we have to trace some of it, not all of it, but some of it to decisions that were made 50 and 60 years ago. And so that the effect of these wicked choices is often down the road and not even felt by the one who, or immediately felt by the one who made the choice. Solomon's a great example of this. So the consequences of Solomon's wickedness, completely destabilized the nation, ended up splitting the nation. But Solomon didn't see it. His son did. And then you go to Israel, and the northern kingdom, I think, is a case study in how this fleshes itself out. So that you have Jeroboam now establishing 2 altars in Israel so that people didn't go to Jerusalem. One in Dan and one, I don't remember where, one farther south, but he established 2 altars, 2 idols, golden calves in Israel for people to go and worship. And he laid the groundwork for 200 years of idolatry, of a kingdom that never actually had any kind of sustained dynasty. So that you might have a father, a son, and a grandson reign. And after that, somebody else, the grandson is killed in a mutiny, and there's a coup, and they establish another government. And then a guy like Jehu comes along and wipes everybody out. And then somebody comes along and wipes out Jehu's kids. And you have kings reigning for 7 days in Israel. There's absolutely effects. They're not always immediate, and we don't always connect the dots, but they're there. So let me move on. I spent a lot more time on that than I intended. But how do we apply this? Let me quickly give you some application from Proverbs 16:12. Seek righteous leaders. Really, it's that simple. Seek righteous leaders. We recognize that's a challenge. And so we, unfortunately, we talk about choosing the lesser of two evils. And, there may be points and times where you say they're both equally wicked. I can't choose either one of them. But we seek for righteous leaders. And it should be true as Christians that we are supporting those who are actually promoting righteousness. And even we say, well, they're not electable. That's fine. That's actually not, our task is not to make them electable or to elect them. Our task is to choose righteousness. And I think, honestly, part of our problem in American government is we have opted for electable leaders instead of righteous leaders. But I'm not going to get into that. I'll be here the rest of the time talking about that. So seek righteous leaders as much as we are able. Never imagine wickedness will be good for you or the nation. So let me state it bluntly. Our president right now is a wicked man. He has been, at least his adult life, he has been grossly immoral, has promoted vice, I would say, has been unethical. He might have been legal, but I don't think he's been ethical in all of his business dealings. And we know things that he has said and done that are grossly wicked, that no Christian should ever excuse or justify. Is wickedness like that good for America? No. Now, am I saying you never should have voted for him if you voted for him? No, actually I'm not. My point I'm making here is we should still have a very clear moral dividing line. And so we would say, yes, he is our president. By all means, we are going to honor him, honor the king. We are going to speak respectfully of him. We are going to pray for him. But we are not going to think that the wickedness that he may promote is good for us. So the way we're seeing this right now in our nation is in part the rhetoric. And unfortunately, our current president has been a big part of this. There has been for years, the left side of the aisle has been, very strong in their rhetoric, much willing to engage in name calling, in I would say slander and hateful speech. And I think it's accurate to say that the right side of the aisle has been less willing to do that. Not that they've never done it. They've been less willing. But now we've been seeing in the last, I would say, 8 to 10 years, a rise of those who are going to stand up and say vile things about their opponent. And they're coming from the right side of the aisle. And there are those within Christianity who have said, that's good. We need people who will speak up and fight in that way. It is never right, it's never good to speak evil of another person, to call them names. I know I'm going to come to this in a few weeks. It's never good to call a person scum. They're not scum. They're not some little green thing you find floating. They're not subhuman. They are people created in the image of God. And no matter what may be accomplished by calling that person scum, the end result will not be good for our nation. And we cannot imagine that wickedness is good. The end does not justify the means. The end does not make the means good in any way. We should despise evil in all forms. We should promote righteous officials. When we see those who are in office that are striving for righteousness, we should be behind them. We should support them. We should be very vocal in our encouragement and promotion of them. And we need to consider God's opinion of your leaders. Really, we need to think about, what does God think about them? Not just what does Wall Street think about them. What does God think about them? What do other nations think about them? What does God think about them? That's what we need to consider first and foremost. It's very interesting to me that the purpose of government, these three things have long been identified from the New Testament as the primary purpose of government. And it's supported by the Old Testament. Even the nation of Israel supports this. It's very interesting to me that we find them also in Proverbs. I didn't just take the three things and then say, okay, where are they in Proverbs? I actually was just looking and, oh, there they are. So these truly are in Proverbs. First purpose of government is to restrain evil. To limit it. That's Romans chapter 13, very clear. It's to limit evil. It's to punish evil. Again, that's Romans chapter 13. Proverbs also teaches us a wise king sifts out the wicked and brings the threshing wheel over them. So you take grain and you sift it out. You crush it, you throw it, you bring the chaff down, or you get rid of the chaff, and you bring in the grain, and then you thresh it. The threshing wheel is part of that process of separating the chaff from the kernel there. And it's not if you're a grain of wheat, it probably doesn't feel good. It has something scraping over you and then something pounding upon you. That's what he's describing. The other thing is to do justice. These are all closely related to one another, but it's doing justice. So in this sense, it's not just punishing evil, but it is protecting the innocent, the helpless. It's not equality in the sense of making sure everybody has the same outcome, but it is the equality of treating all the same, of giving justice to the rich and the poor alike. And the purpose of government is to do those three things. And it's worth noting, even though I don't have time to expand on it, it's worth noting that's all the Bible says about this. There's no direct statement in the Bible about providing for jobs or giving a basic minimum wage or providing a living income or Medicare and Social Security. None of those things are in Scriptures as the purpose of government. And I think I know we do well to narrow our understanding that we know what the Bible has given to the government to do and then other things that governments do. And we can talk separately about whether those things are right and proper and good. But we can't talk about them as if the Bible gives those things to the government to do. So, what are principles for good governance? So Solomon telling his son here, here's how you govern well. Be righteous. We've already touched on this one in Proverbs 16:12, but be righteous. Love righteous people. And this is, as we're talking about, why does wickedness prosper? We said a couple times it was said, so many wicked people around. They pal around with other wicked. They support other wicked people. They're not going to turn him in because they know he'll turn them in. Good government is righteous and loves the righteous ones. And related with that, it has righteous counselors. It seeks godly good counsel, not just expedient counsel. Speak the truth. It says, excellent speech is not becoming to a fool, much less lying lips to a prince. You've heard the joke. How do you know when a politician is lying? Yeah, his lips are moving, right? I mean, we have fallen so far short of biblical wisdom that we jest about something which is a severe issue. It's a problem. That we treat those and have been accustomed to our leaders lying. Good government speaks the truth. Be merciful and gracious. It says mercy and truth preserve the king. Kindness and graciousness. Do not be greedy. Don't be looking to get rich. Don't be trying to make money off of your office. And so I phrased them in the sense of what should you do if you're governor. They should also be, we look at this and say, this is what I should seek for in a leader. One who is not greedy, one who is merciful, one who is truthful. We should be seeking for the righteous and the lovers of the righteous to be in office. The blessings of good government, two things: widespread rejoicing. When it goes well with the righteous, the city rejoices. And when the wicked perish, there is jubilation. And this is another area where Proverbs comes head to head with our culture and confronts its lies. And we absolutely live in a culture that says that the promotion of righteousness is harmful. It is oppressive. It is causing people to spiral into depression and committing suicide because we are opposing their immoral agenda. And it is absolutely phrased as if the righteous ones are those who are bringing harm and suffering in our nation. What Scriptures says is that when the righteous are prosper and the wicked are punished, then there is good and joy. And then as well, it just brings national security. Because of the transgression of the land, many are its princes. Again, I point to the northern kingdom of Israel and the incredible turnover of kings, the violence from generation to generation, and in just a short span of time having so many kings because of their wickedness. And what happened as a result of that is the nation of Israel, long before it was finally destroyed and taken captive, it suffered greatly at the hands of its enemies. It was losing pieces of its land to the surrounding nations. There was no security in its wickedness, but only in righteousness. How do we respond to our government? With respect. Proverbs 24:21 says, "My son, fear the Lord and the king." Just that simple. We speak, we treat them with respect, and he's comparing our response to God with our response to the king. And we recognize that God is ultimate, and God is perfect and holy and is deserving all of our praise, and the earthly king is not. There are limits in how we fear the king. We always fear God more than the king. But there absolutely is supposed to be that respect and reverence to the king, to the ruler of the nation, because they have been appointed by God. We speak righteousness. Whether or not righteousness is acceptable or not, we speak righteousness. Have a pure heart. If you want to have a good government, we ourselves have to be pure in heart. We speak graciously, related closely with speaking righteousness, but we speak kind words. We don't get caught up in the name calling. We don't get caught up in the verbal abuse, in the hatred of those who are our political opponents, those who are on the different side, even when it comes to these major issues. When we talk about abortion and homosexuality in the transgender movement, and we are in complete disagreement with others that promote those things. And yet at no point in time are we permitted to speak evil of them. At no point in time are we permitted to slander them, to lie about them. At no point in time are we permitted to dehumanize them, to call them names as if they are less than human or other than human. We must, in speaking clearly, honestly, biblically, speak also graciously. We have to do both. We do not provoke the ruler. We beware of provoking our government. It's not proper for Christians to riot, to accomplish some end. Do not covet gifts from them. We don't look to be rewarded by them. In fact, the context, the verses there, Proverbs 23, is when you sit down to eat with the ruler, consider carefully what is before you, and put a knife to your throat if you are a man given to appetite. Do not desire his delicacies, for they are deceptive food. It's a great honor to be invited to sit down and feast with the king, but it's going to come at a cost. It's part of what Proverbs is saying. Don't covet gifts from them. Don't covet their promotion. Don't covet what they can give you, because they're going to ask something in return, and you may not be willing to give it. Do not imagine that you understand their plans. He says the heart of kings is unsearchable. And I think that's a helpful one as we navigate our news cycles. And we hear all this information. And yet we know, at least we should know, we never know the full truth. We know pieces skewed by the presenter's perspective. And so we need to be careful not to assume that we know what they're doing, we know what's motivating them, we know what their end is, we know why or what. And then we need to be patient in promoting change. By long forbearance, a ruler is persuaded. We, if you will, we play the long game. And we're patient. We do not, again, resort to violence, disobedience to accomplish change. So, Proverbs 29:26. Many seek the ruler's favor, but justice for man comes from the Lord. I'll tell you this, in English, I would define this, I would give this one kind of parallelism, but in Hebrew it has another kind. So, in English, what kind of parallelism do you see there? Yeah, I think it's very clearly a contrasting parallelism. In Hebrew, the word order is different. And so here's my translation in the same word order. Many seek the face of the ruler, but from Jehovah is justice for man. And so looking at it in that respect, what kind of parallelism do you see there? This is the mirroring parallelism. You say one thing and then you say the same in reverse order. So you have many people seek the face, and the King James or New King James it's a good translation. The favor of the good orders or good decisions of the ruler, but then the ruler is actually Jehovah, who gives justice to men. So you have the same three key words, three key ideas that are repeated in one order and then reversed and restated in the next line in a different order. We have the many that seek the ruler's favor. And that really is just another word for justice. It really is. It's what they're seeking from the ruler, from the king, is his favor. But where does justice for man come from? It comes from Jehovah. Yeah, it comes from the Lord. And so even though people seek justice from the king, they seek a good decision, a good outcome from the king, ultimate justice comes from God. And as we close out this thinking about government, this is a perspective we have to keep in the front of our mind. That ultimately, that people are looking for good in the wrong place. We should not be looking for good from our rulers. We should not be looking for these ultimate things from them, because God is the ultimate judge of all. He is the one who ultimately is going to make everything right. He is the one who's ultimately is going to punish the wicked. He is the one that we should look to, because God's favor is far more important than the king's favor. If we have his blessing, we can endure the cursing of kings. But if we have the blessing of kings and the wrath of God, we are sunk. We have no hope. We have no joy. God's favor is far more important than the kings, and the most powerful ruler will always be inferior to God. So as we think about just how this works in our nation, our ultimate hopes are not in whoever's in office. Again, it matters how we vote, who we vote for. It matters that we vote, but not ultimately. And this is one reason that some of these squabbles about politicians or government decisions should not be dividing churches. I remember during the pandemic, I know of pastors that resigned or were forced to resign because of conflict in the church over things like mask mandates and social distancing. Do those things matter? Yeah. Are they ultimate? No. Should they separate believers, brothers and sisters in Christ? No, they're not that important. And so we recognize the limits of government. No matter who is in office, no ruler will convert the souls of men. No ruler will make America a fully righteous nation. America's not even promised that. We shouldn't be expecting that. Our hope for the fully righteous nation is in the millennium. The rulers that we have cannot change hearts. They can change laws. They can establish good laws or evil laws, and that matters. But they cannot do the most important things. We have to recognize the limits. And so we trust God to do what is right in the land. We trust Him. He is our ultimate hope, not a politician. Again, I don't think we need to be skeptical and cynical. We don't need to assume the worst. I don't think we should assume the worst of every politician. But we should never place my ultimate hope in Him and think that if I don't get the right guy in office, America's going to fail and everything's going to be horrible. You know what? America's going to fail at some point. But everything will not be horrible. The purposes and plans of God will continue. The people of God will continue. Now, I do recognize there will be suffering along the way. I don't want to trivialize the suffering that occurs when any nation collapses. But that suffering still is temporary. And for believers, it does not compare to the joy that is going to be revealed. And so we do not place our ultimate hope in any politician. We do remember that leaders do have a significant effect on the nation's well-being. So again, I'm not saying these things don't matter. Because who we put in place can stabilize or destabilize a nation. The decisions made by our courts have an incredible impact upon our communities. And so remember that it does matter. Seek God's favor more than man's, and seek God's righteousness first.